Alright, welcome back. It's time to take a look at the Rokh. Now, the Rokh became quite popular lately. A lot of my friends started flying it, and I believe it's because of the new skills and new buffs that we have received in the last couple updates. But it will be interesting to see how the ship will perform now. The Rokh has been known to be one of the tankiest battleships in the game. It is basically the shield tank version of the Abaddon. Now, the trade description of the ship is the same. You get a very nice damage bonus, very nice optimal range bonus, and most importantly, a shield resistance bonus. Total of 20% if you have the bonus, if you have the skill on level 5, which will improve the tankiness of this thing quite a bit. After all, it is in the name, Rokh. It's meant to be as hard as a rock to crack, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, this is primarily a shield tank, and it has a pretty good capacitor, which does allow the ship to run the shield boosters for a very long time, and the other stats are generally okay. The Rokh is definitely not the fastest. It's definitely, slow, which again does kind of correlate with the name of the ship. Now, let's take a look at the fitting here. This is one of the older builds that I have. 2097.71 DPS for a tank build is actually pretty solid. You can see the improvement in the range and tracking speed on the large railguns. These are the snub-nosed railguns, the blasters. And overall, I have to admit, they do have some very nice tracking and overall some pretty good DPS. One Scrammer, dual Nosferatus, one web, dual boosters, one damage control, and triple adaptives. So this is something of a PvP, PvE build that focuses on tank. 5 minutes is the capacitor time, which honestly is kinda impressive, since shield boosters do eat a lot of capacitor. Now I don't have the nanocore upgrade, only the primary attributes, 18% extra railgun damage, and I mostly have this nanocore for the looks, since when I record a ship, I like to make the ship, physically look good, and I think the black and white nanocore, the white and blue nanocore, or whatever it's called, is actually looking pretty good on this thing. But you have a lot of other nanocores to choose from. Some of them are paid. I would personally recommend that you go with the Concord Pass nanocores, or you can actually go with the blue or green nanocores. They're also very affordable in the market, and you don't have to pay much money for them. I mean, they're basically available for risk, so you can get them quite easily. Now, for the rigs, I will show you the more expensive build, and later on I will also show you the cheaper option. This build is focused on maximum possible shield resistance alongside with shield volume. I like to increase the shield volume and resistance on these resistance tank ships because it gives you a lot of buffer to play around with. And here you can take a look at the shield resistance. 363,000 hit points, 93,000 in shield, 60% and 63% resistance. Now as for the implant, you have two options, but realistically only the high power coil is definitely going to be, I would say, the best option. The thermal circulation is more for armor tanks, but if you have the thermal circulation, then you can take advantage of the DPS part of that implant. But the high power coil is definitely the way to go. And for the general units, depending on the level of implant that you have, you can pick between magnetic field stabilizers, you can pick between more tank or more accuracy, more tracking, more range. I mean, it really depends on what type of ship you want to build. Now there are the builds for Rokh that use the ship as a sniper, also a good option, but I prefer to use the Rokh at close distances because of the high DPS output that you can have on the ship. But a sniper is also a valid option to pick for this ship. Okay, now let's undock and let me show you the active stats of this ship. I mean, it's built to be this is the tank build, so you can expect some pretty crazy stats on the tank on this thing. The DPS will be improved a little bit once the implant is active, but again, any type of extra DPS that you can get from a tank build is good DPS. So honestly, it's not going to be that noticeable. Well, I see noticeable, but definitely going to be very nice improvements. Any DPS is good DPS. So, right, let's take a look at the stats. 834,000 hit points, 90, 87, 91, 92, and 87% resistance. This is really tanky, and this is without the damage roll. Overall, just as I expected, pretty crazy. As most of my most of my builds, 2.4 million hit points when the damage roll is active. Now you might be thinking, well, what's the difference between integrations and non-integrations besides ISK? Well, I'll show that in this video as well. 3.6 thousand DPS when the hype oracle kicks in, which honestly is pretty solid. And I honestly do like how tanky this thing is. He will definitely outlast a lot of ships out there. Only the Balgorn might be a problem, but even the Balgorn might suffer from that type of DPS. Alright, well, besides the triple adaptives, we can mix and basically add 2 adaptives and 1 reactive shield hardener. The reactive hardener is good against lasers, good against drones, and good against railguns. Basically, single damage types or dual damage type weapons will their DPS will be significantly reduced if you have a reactive, because it can focus that resist on 1 or 2 damage types. And instead of the damage roll, you can keep the damage roll if you like, but if you want more capacitor, a capacitor battery is definitely going to be a very nice choice. But nowadays, because of the high level implants and all the crazy DPS out there that we have, I prefer to have a damage control because it can really reduce the incoming burst damage of ships that have some very crazy DPS. And the damage control is basically a perfect counter to all of the current meta DPS builds that utilize maximum DPS but very little to no tank. A tanky ship like this can easily withstand a barrage Macariel, can easily withstand a glass DPS striker, and it can also withstand a lot of other high DPS ships. And if they don't have stabs, you are going to be easily killing them because they will have literally no tank. Now the speed on this thing is not as impressive as expected, since it is a Rokh and it's not meant to be that fast. But it almost gets 1 kilometer per second, which honestly is, I would say, okay. It's definitely average, not the slowest, but at the same time definitely not the fastest battleship that I had here. And of course you can use an afterburner if you like, but a micro warp drive definitely the better choice if you want to get in range quickly. Since you have blasters, you definitely don't want your targets to be outside of your range. It can be a pretty nasty experience if they are outside of the range, because you might not be able to hit. You don't get a tracking bonus, but you get a range bonus, so that extra range bonus does help a lot, since you have to remember that the blasters in the game have the shortest range. So you definitely don't want anything to be outside of the webs and scramblers. And let me just show you how quick this thing can go with the afterburn, just to show you Now surprisingly it is capacitor stable. 448.98 meter per second, still faster than the Balgorn, so yeah, that's a very good bonus. The Balgorn is still the slowest battleship in terms of speed with afterburn and micro warp drive. Alright, let's change the builds a couple times again. Now you basically have a lot of different options to go with the Rokh. Now since I have very good rigs here, I can easily just afford to add a bunch of other modules that can focus on range, tank, even capacitor, or I can even focus on the passive tanking. Now the passive tanking is also very good on the ship, and if they decide to buff the passive shield regeneration, then a build with the shield extenders is definitely going to be a very interesting one. And for the minion slots, dual webs in a Nosferatu or a neutralizer definitely the way to go. And I'll just add that passive tank that I was talking about, triple shield extenders. Now surprisingly, this actually does work really well. A lot of my friends have tested this out and they have recommended me to try it out myself and to adapt this one damage control and triple shield extenders. Now I have about 124,000 shield hit points and some pretty good stats on the shield. You can enhance the shield even more if you are using a shield extender general unit, and I'll just do that right now. You can enhance your shield by another 30% per extender, which means even more tank, more hit points and more buffer. So if and when developers buff passive shield regeneration, then a build like this is going to be nasty, and I love it. Let's unlock and let's see how much tank can I get out of this thing. So right now, if the developers are listening, and I know that they are listening, I would recommend that they buff the passive shield regeneration on all ships. Would allow for a lot more variety in builds, and passive tanking might actually be more fun. But you know, we will see what they'll do. I've heard that they will enhance it. I'm just trying to help out here. So 151,000 hit points and 900 plus thousand hit points overall, which is really tanky. And you can activate the extenders. You can activate all 3 extenders if necessary, and then activate the damage control. Basically, the extender active time will absorb as much damage as possible, and it can absorb a lot of damage. So yeah, 2.7 million hit points, 94, 96, 97, 95% resistance. This thing is a floating brick, or should I say a rock. Yeah, I know. They knew exactly what they were doing when they were naming this ship. They meant that it will be tanky and that it will be hard as a rock, and they definitely did nail the naming of this ship. Now there are several different builds, tanky builds that you can do. You can do triple adaptives, and you can also add 1 damage control. Now this will give you extra shield resistance, but it will reduce the shield volume just a little bit. And I'm the type of player who prefers to have more resistance over hit points, but if I can combine hit points and resistance at the same time, I'll definitely do that, basically to get the best of both worlds. And let's unlock and let me show you the active stats of a build like this. Now you can also do dual adaptives, 1 reactive and 1 damage control. That will definitely be extremely tanky against lasers, drones, and against other railguns, because then you will be able to literally reduce the incoming damage to 98%, and the target will do about 5 to 2% of their damage. So yeah, if something gets close to you like that, they are not going to live long if they don't have stabs. And since I know that there are some ships out there without stabs, or you can basically do a bait build, 3 million hit points is definitely perfect for that job. Triple scramblers and 1 web, and basically anything that gets close to you, if they don't have stabs, they will get destroyed, because they're not going to go through the tank on this thing. And this is the beauty of tank. A good tank will beat high DPS. There's just no other way around it. Unless you're fighting a dreadnought, then actually you can theoretically tank a dreadnought. Theoretically you can tank a dreadnought with a very similar build with shield boosters, because we can reduce the incoming damage by a significant amount. And here I'll do that build with dual adaptives, 1 reactive and 1 damage control. Overall, I really do like this build. It's perfect for a fleet. It can also be perfect for a bait. Basically, if you want to bait aggro, a fantastic ship to do that with. That Rattlesnake pilot from last week that tried to bait our dreadnoughts can learn something from this video today here. You don't active tank a bait ship, because if you want to bait aggro to hot drop your capital ships on someone, you want to have as much buffer as possible, because active tank is not going to mean much if you're getting shot by 5 dreadnoughts, and a lot of shield hit points, a lot of resistance, and the damage control is definitely going to allow you to live long enough for the silo to be opened and for the fleet to actually jump in, and you will probably be alive at the end of the whole ordeal. So a passive tank, passive chonk, passive brick tank is the better way to go if you want to use this ship as a bait, and it's a, I would say, cheaper option than a Ralsec, although both have the same shield stats. So I would still use a Rokh for bait, because the Ralsec is more expensive, but the Rokh is cheaper, and not many expect a Rokh to be a bait ship, but we do expect a Ralsec to be bait. So yeah. And just for the lols and giggles, I'll just add a full-on resistance build. Now, the practical use of this build is limited. I wouldn't personally use it only if, like, let's say you're part of a big fleet, a big shield tank fleet, and if you have logistics, then I would say you can use something like this, because then your shield will be repaired by the fleet, and you will be extremely tanky. So the repairs will be quite easy to do. But besides that, I don't really see much use, besides, you know, to demonstrate how tanky and how much resistance I can push out of this thing. And you still get some pretty good DPS, by the way, don't forget that. Let's see, 980,000 hit points, and with the damage control, it's 2.8 million, 96, 97, 96, 98, and 97% resistance. Pretty good, pretty tanky, and yeah, this is undoubtedly a very tanky Battleship. Okay, well, now let's. I know that, well, this build that I currently have, because of the integrations, is kind of expensive. So let me remove the modules first, and now let me remove the rigs. Now, since this ship has some very nice stats on the shield, it already gets basically a plus 20% bonus on resistance. It doesn't really take much to get the shield resistance up to a decent spot. Now, it has a hull on EM, so of course, since this is a shield tank, you want to have very good EM resistance to counter lasers, or at least reduce the laser damage as much as possible. So, anti-EM reinforcer, and now from 20 it goes to 52, which is a pretty good, now it's actually pretty solid. Now, the other little hole is on thermal. You can add one anti-thermal reinforcer if you like, but it already has some decent numbers there, so it's not entirely necessary. But in this case, I will slap one anti-thermal, and now I have 65% in thermal resistance, which is good. And this allows me to play around with the third one. You can enhance the booster, or even add a third resistance rig, or in my case, I will enhance the shield volume. And now I have about 83,000 shield hit points, and as you can see, I almost replicated the same resistance values that I had with the integrations. Of course, with the integrations, it is a little bit higher, but at the same time, a build like this is much cheaper and definitely very easy on the wallet. So let's undock and let me show you the active stats. Now, you might think that the difference is abysmal in terms of shield resistance, but on the grand scale of things, if you compare the amount of ISK, how much this build costs, and the amount of ISK that the previous build costs, there is a little difference. As I like to say, little to no difference. 153,000 hit points, which honestly is still pretty good for a ship like this, with this current build and with the current price of the modules and rigs, and 2.2 million hit points when the damage control is active. So yeah, you lost about 300,000 hit points with the damage control, or about 150,000 hit points without the damage control, but it is much easier in the wallet, and it will still get the job done without a problem. So yeah, that's a very interesting result there. I love when the integrations, when the integration build and when the normal build is almost identical, because one costs a kidney and the other one costs about 150 million ISK, which is a very big difference. Now let's heat things up and let's do a DPS build for PvE and for PvP. Now we can go with the classic triple burst, triple Arator rigs for maximum possible DPS, and I'll just remove all these rigs because they're not going to be suitable for this. And this is a PvP build that I would use. Now the difference, what I would do, I would add 3 scrummers and a web because of stabs, and then you basically have enough points, and you have also enough tank and enough DPS to kill most of the battleships. This build is primarily to be used against big ships, battlecruisers, battleships, and things like that, because you don't want to go around to chase frigates with a battleship. That's not going to end well. Frigates are killing battleships, despite what some other folks say. The frigates easily can kill a battleship because big guns have bad tracking and small ships are fast. Small ships with bad tracking equals you are dead if you get caught. So let's take a look at the maximum possible DPS output, or let's see how much the ship can actually yeet. No, the tank is actually pretty good. 266,000 hit points. You get a bonus from the skills. On top of that, one adaptive, basically like having dual adaptives running at all time, and you have the damage roll, which will give you some extra tank when necessary. 789,000 hit points, which honestly is more than enough, and it will last for a very long time for you to actually deliver enough DPS to blow up the target. Now with this build, you have to be careful against other tanky ships, because a good tank beats a very good DPS, so you have to be very cautious when you're picking a target. Make sure that you pick a target that you know that you can kill before they kill you. That's basically how this build works and how this build goes. Of course, if you don't have stabs, you have to be careful not to get caught. So again, being careful is very, very important. 11,500 DPS is the maximum DPS output, which is kind of scary. And yeah, that should be, I would say, enough to blow up a vast majority of ships before they can go through your shield. Alright, now besides this build, we can add a bit more tank. If you like, we can add like one more adaptive, which I'll do here, which will sacrifice a little bit of DPS, but you do get a bit more tank. And that in some cases that is definitely a better option, a better idea. It also is very situational. You can also add one shield extender to enhance to give your ship a bit more shield hit points. Also can be very interesting to use in combination of the damage control, because you can basically absorb a lot of damage with that one activation of the extender, and it also gives you a lot of passive shield, which honestly is looking really impressive on this ship so far. So these are the builds that you can use, that you can run on this ship, and that's basically the builds that I use on most of my PvP boats nowadays. And this will be a PvE high sec only build, high sec basically for high sec islands. It is surprisingly capacitive, or should I say not surprisingly, because the Rokh does get some pretty good capacitive performance straight from the start. 11,000 gigajoule capacitor, which is actually really solid. And let's just take a quick look at the maximum possible DPS output that you can get with the Rokh. Honestly, so far the Rokh has been improved. It definitely does feel a bit different. This ship feels different in terms of its DPS performance. Now, I said that all the weapons have been improved. I mean, we have received the new gunnery skills, the new missile skills, lightweight ship skills. All these new skills have vastly improved the performance of the weapons. And I have to say, the performance is definitely noticeable, and I do expect them to to add more tank to ships at one point, because that's basically where we are headed right now. I really do expect them to enhance the ship's hit points to balance out the high DPS with the ship's hit point, or they might nerf the implants. I mean, the anniversary of the game, I think it's like the 3rd anniversary. Has it been really the 3rd anniversary already of the game? So we will see what they will do on the. I still expect some new ships to be added. So yeah, that's going to be fun. And the maximum DPS output is 12,588.03 DPS. Nice. That's some fantastic DPS, honestly. Fantastic PvE DPS. Alright, well, now speaking of PvE, let's do a mission here. Let's see how this ship will perform. Now, as I mentioned before, you have basically 2 options how to do PvE or PvE or PvP in this ship. You can do the blaster build, the blaster rock, or you can use the long range railguns, the rifle railguns. Now, with the rifle railguns, you will lose a little bit of DPS, but you will gain extra range. And I believe a lot of you guys would actually prefer to use the long range build on this ship. I mean, both are good. I would say for the AFK value, the long range sniper build is definitely the way to go. If you like to use this ship like the Apocalypse Striker, for example, with the beam ladders, you can. You have some really good range, and you still have some very good DPS. But if you want to approach in a more active way of playing, then a build like this with the blasters is definitely one of the ways to go. It has enough tracking so that I don't have to use tracking computers, so I can just go with quad magnetic field stabilizers and basically go maximum DPS, and a build like this will clear the high stack missions really quickly. I would say actually very quickly, impressively quickly, because of the new skills that when they kick in, that's going to make a very interesting and notable difference. Now I know, ironically, this is a high sec build, but I am in low sec because I like to. It's a longer mission, and it gives me enough time to actually see how the ship will act and perform. Now, dual webs are good, but in some cases you might need 3 webs, so that's one thing to keep in mind. And you can sacrifice the adaptive shield hardener for a capacitor battery in order to keep that shield boost running for as long as possible. But if you have good skills, then dual webs will be enough, and one large Nosferatu will be enough to maintain the shield boost running at all times. Since you have a lot of capacitor on this ship, you can easily keep the boost running for a very, very long time. And the skill bonus for the resistance is going to be very beneficial because it does give you some extra tank to work with, which does reduce the need for a adaptive or reactive shield hardener, at least for high sec. So you can technically replace that adaptive for any other module that you want. You can even go with a fifth magnetic field stabilizer, so that we can have a constant output of DPS. Honestly, when you think about it, you have a lot of different ways how to approach the Rokh. Now, I have to say, this is honestly a very fun to fly ship. Now, my friends mostly use this ship for PvP, both for tank, for sniping, and as an active tank, passive tank. I mean, they have a lot of different builds, and I did try to cover some of them. I think I actually covered most of them that they use. In my hands, the Rokh will definitely be a tank, a passive tank in most cases. Now, passive tanking is very fun. You can basically, if we get that extra if we get passive shield regeneration buffed, then a build like this is definitely going to be a passive tank build with extend is definitely going to be very interesting. Or they can also add rigs that enhance the passive shield regeneration. If we get rigs that enhance passive shield regeneration, that's going to be awesome. I would definitely add those rigs into the integrations that I use. I mean, that would actually allow me to do some very, very, very scary stuff with with my shield tanks. I would definitely recommend for the developers to do something like that. I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to have. Passive shield tanking is definitely going to be awesome on smaller ships like frigates, cruisers, and stuff like that that can do a very nice speed tank. The battleships can also benefit from it because then you can do a full-on passive build that is going to be ridiculously tanky. And I mean, you have a lot of ways how to approach builds in the game, and I love that aspect of Eve. The way that the fact that we can make thousands of different builds. Now, of course, not all builds are going to be good. I mean, you guys know my stance on hybrid tanks. Don't hybrid tank your ships. Just don't hybrid tank your ships. It's not a good thing. not a good thing to do to your ship. Well, that was actually a very quick mission. The Rokh performed really well. I'm very happy with its performance. Definitely definitely a very awesome ship to have. And the new updates have definitely improved it. In the DPS aspect, yeah, very significant improvements, and honestly, very happy with the ship. I see why the Rokh became a lot more popular than before. Definitely a very good ship choice if you like tank, and also if you like some good old DPS. The Rokh can do both. So if you want to see more and if you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out a lot. And well, with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.